Well, I was rolling down that highway, listening to my radio, and the news was crying, bad to worse. The world's so full of woe. Sound familiar? When I spied a bumper sticker that said it oh so good. It said, "Honk if you love Judas," and in parentheses, Jesus would. Honk if you love Judas, don't you know Jesus would? Christ preached compassion, peace, and brotherhood. So turn the other cheek in the love for which he stood. Oh, and honk if you love Judas, 'cause you know that Jesus would. Well, those words got me to thinking about the love that Jesus gave to the soldiers driving in those nails that sent him to his grave. He said, "Love those who hate us," and he showed us that we could. So honk if you love Judas, 'cause you know that Jesus would. Sing along with us now. Honk if you love Judas, don't you know that Jesus would? Christ preached compassion, Christ preached compassion, peace and sisterhood, peace and sisterhood. So turn the other cheek, in the love for which he stood, in the love for which he stood. Oh, and honk if you love Judas, 'cause you know that Jesus would. Well, it's such a heavy challenge. This old world's so filled with night, and there's always some reason to hate someone or fight. Oh, but Jesus said it clearly. Love is not misunderstood. Either feel it or you don't. So honk if you love Judas, Jesus would. Honk if you love Judas, don't you know that Jesus would? Christ preached compassion, peace and humanhood, peace and humanhood. So turn the other cheek in the love for which he stood. Oh, and honk if you love Judas, Jesus would. We're singing, honk if you love Judas, 'cause you know that Jesus would. Yes, he would. Yes, he would.
Welcome to another Question of Meaning with Arthur and Katie, and we thought we'd discuss religion today.
Oi.
Yeah, there should be a kind of fraught with anxiety here. Not
We'll
really.
have politics next week. We'll
That's
do
right.
back-to-back shows of things you should never talk about.
So what's the third? Sex, I think? I did that on purpose. I wanted to see what would happen when he was drinking.
Yoicks. Why not? Throw
Why
it into
not?
the mix. We'll do anything. Establishing our relationship here in Asheville. We just moved here 2 months ago, and we hope to be tarred and feathered and run out of town as soon as may be.
Well,
I want to go live on an island somewhere for the rest of my life. I'm getting tired of this scene.
when we were discussing doing religion, Arthur was like, "Well, God, it's gonna be kind of like, what are we going to be, religion bashing?" And then we were making the list of songs. So this isn't religion bashing at all. For me, and we're going to end up talking mostly about Christianity because Arthur and I both were raised in the Christian tradition and we live in a mostly Christian nation. So, well, he was Southern Baptist. It does have that effect. I think only Catholic has a worse effect on your life. But
the Catholics, they really sink the hook, man.
Yeah,
They really.
But you can.
Well, they have a longer tradition. They've been able to perfect it.
Anyway, so what I was saying was that when we looked at these songs, we're really talking about maybe is a more idealistic vision of what Christianity is really talking about, and maybe an attempt to explain and reform Christianity. In a very
Reform's
humble.
a big word now.
Well, I know, but I know what I mean by that is
intelligent critique.
Okay, an intelligent critique. Well, that
philosophical
would be that would be a reform. I mean, which was to reform how we think about Jesus, reform how we think about God, and for me, that's what that song "Honk If You Love Judas" is about. Because
it damn sure is.
Jesus would have forgiven. Judas. Judas didn't give Jesus the chance.
That's right. An act of unrepentant despair. He went off and hung himself. So the story goes. Yeah, because I think Jesus' message was very clear. That's what the song is about. It's called Love. Love your enemies.
Yes. Pray for those who persecute you.
Somebody wants your coat, give me your underwear, too. Walk the extra mile.
Yeah.
Do you think he was making that up? You would think so. What intrigues me about fundamentalism, so-called fundamentalism is love your enemy. It doesn't mean anything else. But the fundamentalists tend to take the Old Testament, I observe, literally. Methuselah, there's a guy that lived over 900 years. He's over 900 years old. The Red Sea really parted for Moses.
Adam and Eve are real people.
Yeah, a nice white couple that lived in the garden.
Yeah.
Hung out with God. Disobeyed the only damn rule they were given. Then that was supposed to be the first act of free will. That's hilarious. That's a little study right there in itself. But the fundamentalists overwhelmingly tend to go running to the Old Testament and take all those Aesop's fables is what they really are. And I think enlightened Jews would be, or forthright Jews would be the first to cop to that. These are teaching parables. The Old Testament could be, and I've read the Bible a couple of times from cover to cover, could be summed up as literally, okay, well, maybe I fudged on numbers.
I haven't even come close.
And begat G-hat, and who gives a E-hat. But the Old Testament can be summed up as, when you walk with God, your life works. When you depart from God, your life turns into a disaster, up to and including fire and brimstone, or going into slavery, or being never able to see the promised land, et cetera, et cetera. But the point is that the fundamentalists want to take all that stuff literally. The Red Sea parted, Noah's flood really happened, the whole world was, Job. I mean, God sick. God and the devil were shooting dice, and picked Job as like a lab rat to experiment on. God had money down that you can't break him. He's my man. And they take all that literally. But when it gets to Jesus, who said, "Love those who hate you. Pray for those who persecute you." And in fact, be exceedingly glad when all that stuff happens to you, because in the same way, they persecuted the prophets who were before you. You're in good when you're catching all sorts of flack from the general public, basically. What Confederacy of Dunces, when the dunces are all in confederacy, you may know a man of genius by this sign. The dunces are all in confederacy against him.
Okay.
And Jesus knew that. So the point is that when the fundamentalists hear Jesus say, "Love your enemies," oh, he meant something else. Suddenly they get all theological and they go to preacher men who make a big deal of them poor little aborted fetuses that have to do with what, which is really what the root of all that intolerance is about, just like gay marriage. But they take Jesus' words and twist them into something else. Nobody talks about carpet bombing or having a nuclear stockpile.
Or some do, very few.
Very few.
Or executions.
Or social justice. Yeah. Right. Everybody's real quiet about that stuff. About loving your enemies. How many Christians keep a gun in your bedside table? What
would Jesus do?
What would Jesus do? Pull out a 9mm and blow away the burglar? I mean, this isn't cheap talk.
But so
if I had a gun, I'd kill somebody if they were trying to break in and hurt Katie.
That's
actually
one of the reasons why we don't have
That's why I don't have a damn gun in my house.
One,
I've never had a gun. I never will.
Yeah.